something disturbing?
Yeah. I think it's something with life.
Life altering? Okay, when I put in the definition of trauma, we get an injury, a disordered psyche or behavioral state resulting from a severe mental or emotional stress, kind of like that lifelong, an emotional upset. And I think that that definition has evolved as we've learned more of the impact that trauma, I think, originally was just you thought of a hospital and you thought of a physical injury. And now we're realizing that those mental injuries, you know, on our emotional well-being, have long-lasting side effects as well. So that also goes to, I found this is an African proverb that I read last year, and it's still stuck out to me. And when I think about the kids that I've worked with EDD, is a child who's not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And I think of kids who don't have a lot of support and who I've worked with, and I see this, that they don't feel like they have a connection with anyone, and so they'll tear up that piece of paper, they'll flip the desk, because they're looking for some type of feeling. And I always still try, because a lot of the kids that I've worked with the trauma background have had consent taken from them, that when I know that the biggest thing that kid needs right in that moment is a hug, and maybe they won't let me, and that's okay, because I always say, do you need a hug, is one of my first statements with a couple of my kids when I would walk into a room, and they'd be tearing it down. And I still remember a 3rd grade boy that was just shaking. And I said, do you need a hug? And he shrugged, and I said, I won't hug you unless you want me to. And he shook his head yes, and going up to him and giving him a hug, because that was what he needed in that moment. He just couldn't ask for it, so I had to know to ask him for it. And that was what he needed. And that connection piece, that anytime I've worked with a kid with a trauma history, I know that the way to promote change is the way to help them through it is through that connection piece. And I feel like we've talked about that a lot this semester, and I just want to continue to reinforce it, that counseling is only effective, and treatment is only effective if there's a relationship built and there's a rapport between you and that student. This is also the increase of the use of trauma. And so this is, like I said, something that we've actually has become part of our culture, and that we've realized the significance of it. That really, before the 1900s, it wasn't really a word that was even used. That it's been in the last 100 years, and even really in the last 20 years, that the use of trauma has really gone up. There's also been a promotion of trauma-informed schools. Have we talked about the trauma schools? Okay. So he opened a school in Akron, and I think it's now opening it's in its 3rd year, and he took the bottom 1% of the kids there. The kids are now in the 3rd grade. They were tested at the end of the 2nd grade, so after 2 years in the school, they went from the bottom 1 percentile to the 16th percentile in reading, and from the bottom 1% to the 25th percentile in math in 2 years. And it's a trauma-informed school that not only does he have counselors in the school and their small class sizes, he also has counselors available for the teachers, and a gym and an athletic trainer, nutritionist on staff for teachers as well. Because his feeling was that if you're going to have teachers work with the hardest kids in the entire district, you needed to support them as well. So I do think that's also a combo thing of, if you are working with kids with a trauma history, you have to be taking care of yourself. And sometimes always your school or an agency that you work at will not provide you that support. It's really great that he is, but it is something that you do have to take care of yourself when you're working in high needs area. But even though that's been a big one that I've been following, it has been something that's been in the news a lot recently. And this one I'm also going to talk about. The Butte Strong Fund grants $232,000 to Butte schools to address childhood trauma. The Butte area is in California, and it was devastated by the Paradise Camp Fire last year. It was the worst wildfire in California's history. 56 people died, and Paradise itself was demolished. And so they're doing not just that trauma happened to one family in a school or a few families in a school. trauma happened to everybody in the area, and what's it look like to respond to a catastrophic trauma that has affected the whole community as well. So, common traumatic events for childhood has of ACEs, which has been these 8 that were found by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente study. Physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence, parental substance abuse, mental illness, suicide or death, crime or imprisonment in the family. And I know you may think I've had this question before of somebody saying, you know, I've had some traumatic things happen to me, but they're actually not one of those 8, you know, so where do I fall in line with, like, I don't have an ACEs, but there are things that I know have happened to me. And I was like, your ACEs may not be on this list, because this list is a list that overall in the thousands of people that they studied, they found these to always be significant triggers or like some significant events that lead to symptoms. You can have another trauma event that is not listed in this 8, and it was traumatic for you, but it may not be traumatic for somebody else. And so it may not be technically an ACEs, but that doesn't still mean it wasn't trauma for you. And so these are some other traumatic events that the Center for Child Traumatic Stress Network put together, of automobile accidents, bullying, life-threatening health situations, witnessing or experiencing community violence, natural disaster, acts of terrorism, or living in a chronically chaotic environment. So again, these were not found to be significant in the overall study, but we can all look at these that they probably are, and if you went through these, they could have some long-reaching effects for your well-being. So, and they have a long-lasting effect. So, the more ACEs you have long-lasting effects on health, behaviors, and even graduation rates, academic achievement. How common are ACEs? This was the original study, I believe. Yeah. So the original study found that 36% had 0, 26%, but still about 20% having 3 to 4, and not having the long-lasting effects. When the study was updated in 2010, so this one was done in 1996, the study was updated in 2010, and so it found 22% with 3 or more, 24% with 1, 41% with 0. There has been discussions about doing a third ACEs study, with also considering community factors in it as well, because like I said, community violence is not considered an ACEs, because we're talking about, I was talking about this with another doctoral student here, that depending on the community, like where I worked in Lancaster, I think I would be hard pressed to find that 40% of the students in the school I worked at had 0 ACEs. That they were probably more at least 2 and above, because I was in a really low SES area. There was a lot of domestic violence that I don't think 40% having 0 would be realistic. And so the fact that they did not take into account communities, I also know the original study, this was a more diverse sample. The first study was mostly white children that they followed through as well. So the second study did try to take into account more diversity, but it still did not take into account community or urban versus rural settings, which I think are also factors to take into account. So overall, one of the things that they found was that 1 out of every 4 children have experienced abuse. 80% of children who experience abuse develop a mental health disorder by the age of 21. And that compared to children with no ACEs, children with 3 or more ACEs are more likely to experience academic failure, have attendance issues, have severe behavioral issues, and almost 4 times as likely to have frequent health issues. So it also is impacting every part of their lives. A person with 4 or more adverse childhood experience is 12.2 times as more likely to attempt suicide.